Good day. Welcome to Westchester Talk Radio, westchestertalkradio.com. Produced by Sharka Creative, made possible by the good folks at Robeson Oil, the house that service built. By Michael Labriola, landscape design and construction of Armonk. By Jaguar Land Rover, Rochelle, White Plains, and Mount Kisco. And by Hightower Westchester, managing your wealth to a fiduciary standard. John Bailey is back with us. John Bailey, two more congressional elections, both in Manhattan. The first one, Lower Manhattan in Brooklyn. The 10th, where Mondaire Jones ran and lost to Dan Goldman. He was one of the attorneys in the first Trump impeachment, Levi Strauss, scion and heir. What happens to Mondaire Jones now?
That's a good question. He's a good man. He has to find another place to run. I don't know. I don't know what you do. Maybe he gets a talk show.
Maybe.
I mean, where defeated politicians go is being a commentator on a talk show, and it's a nice little living, and you keep in front, and maybe you get a constituency. But he doesn't impress me as the kind of person who would be comfortable on a talk show.
I hope he does find an opportunity.
It's a great loss. It's a great loss. He worked hard. He appeared in White Plains. Bowman.
Yeah, even, me as a lifelong Democrat saying, too, that Sean Patrick Maloney, did you really have to do what you did? Could you have not stayed maybe in the 18th district and left Mondaire?
It's all about power with Sean. It's all about
I don't
power.
think Sean Patrick Maloney would have gotten a really tough challenge in the 18th district. So what was the point and the purpose of doing this? Now, also in Manhattan, too, the Upper East Side Silk Stocking District, the 12th, merged with a good portion of the West Side. So that brought Silk Stockings Carolyn Maloney into a head-on fight with her now former good pal, the guy who repped the West Side and still does after the election. He will, Jerry Nadler. And Nadler really beat Maloney bad, I thought. I thought it would be a closer race than it was. I thought Nadler would win. Why did Nadler trash Maloney in this district?
Well, I mean, it calls into the question how really into voting for women men are.
But does it come down to whether or not you're a man or a woman? I thought it should come down to whether or not you are the best candidate, and Nadler had a lot of street cred. There's no question about that, where I think Maloney was looked at as a bit more standoffish, kind of popped in here and there on some issues that were important to her or maybe to her constituents, but otherwise in a lot of ways sat in the background, where Jerry Nadler was one of the early people who led the impeachment process against Donald Trump and did a lot more through the years, too.
Boy, that seems like years ago, doesn't it?
I know.
The Trump impeachment, and people are forgetting it. And I mean, the things that he is doing with his hand-picked judges who just go, hey, whatever you say, Don, are just going to. The courts are no longer the refuge of reason. The appointments that have been made, hands stamped by the Democratic majority, not because this is what they've always done. Well, they have to wake up and smell the coffee. They have to fight on these appointments. If should Trump get reelected, which is quite a possibility if he doesn't run into health problems. I mean, there's always the problem that he has 2 years to go before the election. He's obviously pretty doggone vigorous. He doesn't appear to slow down. He's definitely a dangerous threat to run again and come back like Grover Cleveland, which I believe that was the only president who, after being defeated, came back in 4 years and won again.
Right. By the way, with all the things that have gone on in the courts now the past few years, I guess we've gotten into a situation where we never know how or when or if a court might ever rule on something, because some decisions take so long sometimes. But if it were not for the special master in New York State who threw out what the Democrats did with the original redistricting earlier this year, we might have had a lot less fun the past few months, right?
Well, it wasn't really fun. It was a disaster, really,
For
because
voters, yeah.
well, as Paul Feiner said, it was a disaster. You can't have two primaries and one so close to the actual election itself, because
Right.
now there's no time to campaign. There's what? There's 4 weeks in October, 2 more weeks in September. That's it. 6 weeks.
They also bent a lot of the rules, allowed a lot of rule bending that would have never happened before. For example, like Sean Patrick Maloney, who changed districts and forced Mondaire Jones to do so. Sean Patrick Maloney didn't have to go out and get all the petitions he would have needed in the 18th district to run there, to run in the 17th. It's sort of like, well, whatever you got for the district you were supposed to run in, they count.
They
You don't have to go
suspended
do
the
it again.
petition rule, which was absolutely not vilified in the press.
To me, if you change
press doesn't cover stuff.
Maybe the people in that district where you say you're going to run now, maybe they don't want you to run. Maybe they won't sign your petition. Maybe they might say you come, Sean Patrick Maloney shows up at somebody's door and door opens and the people there say, we like the job Mondaire's doing. Hey, Sean, don't you rep the 18th? Why don't you stay there? But the courts and the state election board allowed this to work out the way it did, so that if you already collected petitions in one district, but you have to move to another now, what you collected in the primary district, the previous district, well, that counts in the new district where you want to run to. Okay.
Well, I think that you may bring up a great point about this ability to skip the petitions. Hey, John Bailey could have run.
Well, I could have.
Yeah, nobody would vote for me, but you could have run. I mean, we missed a golden opportunity
somewhere.
We missed it. Look,
I don't have to work too hard to get on the ballot now. Yeah.
Who is that jerk running in Pennsylvania and has all the talk shows?
Dr. Oz.
Dr. Oz, right. We could have done the Dr. Oz move.
Yeah. I mean, I thought he lived in New Jersey.
Yeah. No,
he doesn't even live
in the state.
And I haven't heard a word about it again.
Live in the state, and Pennsylvania is accepting that. Pennsylvania has got to dump that guy.
I don't know. Maybe he's renting an apartment in Cannonsburg, Pennsylvania, just for legal purposes, so he could run. Cannonsburg gave us a lot of prominent people. Small town. That town gave us Perry Como, Bobby Vinton, the group The Four Coins, and more. So maybe Dr. Oz has a rented apartment in Cannonsburg. I don't know. Just a thought that crossed my mind. He's got to be doing something somewhere to be eligible to be on the ballot in Pennsylvania. The question, what is that? Glad you brought up Paul Feiner, the Greenburgh town supervisor.
Yes, Mr. Feiner is the only politician that says this is madness. We can never do this again. Now, the big thing, though, is that the Democratic Party, by turning against Bowman, Jones, and Biaggi, one stated the three old war horses of the Democratic establishment. They were out to get them. They gerrymandered them wrong to squeeze them out, and they got two of the three.
And I'm sure Alessandra Biaggi, she's prominent enough and has enough prominent backing from AOC and others down in D.C., from the squad and others, that she's going to pop up somewhere. So what do Democratic Party officials do now? Do they basically eat crow?
They will be eating a lot more than crow in the midterms. They will be digesting that the knowledge that by that gerrymandering, they lost some good people. They kept some real war horses that have done very little for years. Elliot Engel being the number one, who had the audacity to say, I'm only here because I'm running in a primary. I'm only here because I'm paraphrasing. That is a really stupid thing to say. The one thing a politician has to do, he has to make the people believe that he cares about them. He has to look earnest and say, oh, I absolutely agree with you. And if you really keep track of things, ladies and gentlemen, and voters out there, when you go to see a candidate, like in White Plains, there's a candidate holding an open house, and they want you to like them. But
Right.
what you
Well,
have
that's
to,
what it comes
you
down to.
have
You
to
gotta kiss the
hold
babies.
them to the fire and say, what are you going to do about this? I once was almost attacked by that silver-haired senator for Albany. He was a big, powerful guy. Eventually got kicked out for corruption, and because I asked him a question he didn't like. And I will never forget. Well, this is what politicians are really like.
That's what they do. I
That's
remember a
right.
few years back where I'm not going to mention the town, Westchester, where there was a battle for mayor. The incumbent was going out, and both parties were looking to put up a viable
Yeah.
candidate. I'm not going to
Yeah.
mention the party, but I did have on the nominee from one of the parties, and I had her on the air. I will say her, it was a woman. And I asked her, why are you doing this? What's making you run now? And she said, well, the party told me I'm the candidate, basically, in so many words. So I said, let's take a step back here. I said, the party told you you're running? So, yeah, pretty much so. Okay. So now we have to kind of advance from there. And you wonder how much of that goes on sometimes with some of the people who get nominated, and you wonder, does this person have a chance, or are they simply fodder? And sometimes people turn out to be
Well, the
fodder.
Republican
That's not what
Party,
an election is supposed to be.
Republican Party has a bad record of selecting tomato cans to run in Westchester County. And this year they have an actual smart person running running in the 16th district against John Miles Bowman, and that's Miriam Flisser, the former mayor of Scarsdale.
Yeah.
And this should be an interesting campaign as to whether she can resonate, because she certainly knows how to run a town.
I think also too the 17th is going to be interesting with Maloney against an up-and-comer amongst the Republicans, Mike Lawler, Rockland County Assemblyman, who seemingly has gotten very involved in his short time up in Albany and seems to think that he has a shot. Some polls have them pretty close overall. So I think down the home stretch here, last 2 months, heading into November, we do have some key races to keep an eye on.
Well, he has taken some intriguing positions when he was out campaigning with Astorino. And to my way of thinking, I hope he moderates some of them.
Yeah, he has moderated a bit, Mike Lawler. He did tell me a few weeks ago, and he looked me in the eye right through the Zoom screen and said, pretty much, regardless of what anybody's personal position might be, that the abortion laws, the right to choose in this state, will stay the same, no matter who might be in charge up in Albany.
Well, may that be the case for the women who need one, and or who have health problems. I mean, where is the compassion across the country? Where are the programs to help these unfortunate women who get pregnant and are poor and can't get the health care they need? Where is that effort? This is what I've always had a problem with the right to life movement.
John Bailey, I'm glad, like I said, you brought
change.
up Paul Feiner. And Paul Feiner is the Greenburgh town supervisor, and there's a controversy in his town, bit of a controversy to some extent. Apparently, an artist, a local artist, was commissioned to put together a mural of prominent figures in and around the town historically on Manhattan Avenue, right near the 287 overpass across Westchester Expressway overpass. And one of the people that he painted was Louis Farrakhan, to which Feiner and the people who run Greenburgh say, well, he's not supposed to be there. We thought we had made it specific as to who and what we wanted and agreed to. And the artist said, well, I thought it was open-ended and I could kind of work in who I thought is prominent. And to some people here in Greenburgh, Louis Farrakhan is a prominent figure. So now the town of Greenburgh has a heavy Jewish population. Farrakhan seen for decades as an anti-Semite. Paul Feiner, of course, happens to be Jewish. Where do we go from here with this if we go anywhere, or is it pretty much what's done is done?
Well, it was an artist's expression, and since the feeling is that artists have the will create, then you have to, if you're going to remove something after it's painted, that's just bad. What about the Malcolm X? What about Huey Newton, or who is that other
Eldridge Cleaver.
Eldridge Cleaver? These are people who led the black surge towards equality after Martin Luther King was assassinated. And and now, to tell you the truth, John, I don't see any national black leadership out there at all. Now,
Does the Greenburgh issue come down to freedom of speech? Maybe too, that this is my speech to include Louis Farrakhan in this mural?
Absolutely. Freedom of speech has to be defined as it is freedom of speech, unless you slander or basically, well, freedom of speech is freedom of speech. And people across the country who don't like what other people say and who want to sue the media for what the media has written about them, well, they only like speech they think is okay. They only like it. And freedom of speech is under attack in this country. It just is. And it's being under attack by persons who like to think what they want to think, and the heck with you. And they don't care what you think.
I think you and I like it from all angles, and we know that that's how we get the best results. If everybody can be heard, I think in the end, most of us are trying to get to the same place, regardless of what our policies or programs might be. And the more we hear about something, I think the better off we are, and we have a better chance of finding a solution.
Yes, as Claude Rains said to Humphrey Bogart in Casablanca, I knew it. You're a sentimentalist. And we all feel that way who report the news or try to. And, we just feel that people are basically good. I've traveled a lot in this country. I've talked to people from all the red states, and they're nice people. They care about their kids. They want the best for their kids. They want the best life.
Mm-hmm.
They're not the politicians who use and fan prejudices across the country in New York, who fan hatred to get a vote.
A few months ago, our good friend Bill O'Shaughnessy, the longtime scion of WVOX radio and WVIP radio in New Rochelle, where we both worked for Mr. O, the legendary Mr. O'Shaughnessy, in the past. I remember a discussion I had on the air with him one day back in 2015, I guess it was, when I was hosting the morning show there. And we both agreed that it doesn't matter what you think. We both said this together at the same time on the air. It doesn't matter what you think. Just think. It matters that you think.
How true. He is extremely erudite, and he just would do a twist on something that would leave you dumbfounded at times as to how crystal clear he was. Very, very Socratic in his pronouncements. Socrates, the philosopher who was hated by the Greek establishment because he would expose their flawed reasoning, which we see much of in public figures today throughout Congress.
And as my mother used to say, she taught me when I was young that if we all thought the same thing, how boring would this world be?
Well, as you can see, everybody in America has lots of opinions, and America is one place that's not boring. And
No question about that. And I think
yeah,
sometimes people who come here from other countries don't understand that and maybe never will understand that. John, I want to bring this up before we go. In the county next door to us and the state next door to us in Westchester,
yeah,
Fairfield County, Connecticut,
yeah.
there is a new rule put together by the athletic powers that be in Fairfield County. It's called No Name, No Numbers at sporting events, that fans no longer can call out a player's name or a player's number in order to prevent disparaging or potentially disparaging comments. For example, you can't say, "Hey, 53, what did you miss that tackle for?" You might get kicked out if you do. Talk about restricting freedom of speech.
Well, number one, how about playing the games without spectators?
Yeah, I
Who
don't think the players would like that. I know the players feed off the fans.
They do. However, listen, I mean, having umpired both soccer and um, both softball and soccer, I will tell you that the worst thing about umpiring is the spectators.
I agree with that.
The worst thing about it is the spectators, because they cheer when a player is injured from the other team. And that is awful. Now, supposedly, there's an athletic director on the site at most games,
Yeah.
who will, oversee to make sure a person who's being obstreperous is ejected, or worse yet, the security at games is terrible.
Yeah, what
Now,
we
in
try to do,
the
and I do a lot of public address around Section
yeah,
1 and around Westchester.
yeah.
Matter of fact, the season's starting this week, and I got a game at Edgemont football later on this week, the season opener for the Panthers in Scarsdale. What we try to do with different schools that I work at, if fans act up, we make an announcement first we do make the announcement, the Section 1 announcement at the beginning of every game about behaving yourself, please, and let's try to turn this into a memorable experience. But if we have to, we'll bring that announcement back or a form of that during the game again to act as a reminder we did nicely ask you before the game to play nice. Let's remember, play nice, and we don't want to have to tell you, sorry, you have to go home before the game comes to an end, or at least you have to leave the premises before the game comes to an end, and wherever you happen to go after that, that's up to you.
Yes, and there also has to be more disciplining of coaches who inflame the crowd by complaining about calls and basically arousing the crowd. And every time there's a call that doesn't go a coach's way, you have made an enemy, and they'll be
Yeah, and
on you.
as you know, as
That's
an
why they
official,
are.
every coach
They are
wants
not
every call.
sportsmen. They
Yeah.
are not sportsmen. They just want to win because they're the coach, and it makes them feel good to win. Very immature.
John, as an official, do you get the impression sometimes the coach knows, even though he's complaining, that you made the right call and he's just trying to influence you to get the next call next time around, that you want to give him a make good because, I know I upset him?
Yeah. Well, that's what you used to feel when you saw Ralph Houk come out and kick dirt on an umpire's shoes. And that's what they do in professional sports.
Yeah.
But this is amateur sports in the truest sense of the word. And it's supposedly to teach kids the ability to compete, to respect the opponent, and to get better. I almost had a fight in one soccer game where a little kid was consistently deking, and a player made a couple of racist remarks at him, and I just called a halt to it, and I said, look, that isn't the way to do it. What you need to do is you got to look at what he's doing to deke you and learn from that and make an adjustment.
Mm-hmm.
Because every time he dekes you and you don't adjust to it and you just lose your temper, you're hurting your own performance.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that quieted that up.
There was a school in Dutchess County where I was the public address announcer for a number of years. Then a new athletic director came in from a different part of the state and kind of does things differently. So I'm not there anymore, seemingly at this point. But a few years back, during a lacrosse game, one of their star players at the school in Dutchess County, and he was a 4-sport star, one of the top wrestlers in Section 1 who gave it up as a senior just to play basketball, his fourth sport. He was a football star and a lacrosse star. He went on to play lacrosse. I believe he still does at a school in the South. His father, an assistant football and assistant lacrosse coach. And about 90 seconds into a game one day, the whistle blows. And one of the referees positions himself next to the right shoulder of this player and makes a motion as if he's got a lacrosse stick in his hand. And he says, every time today I see someone do this, which this player I saw had just done, I'm going to call a penalty. So 3 times during the first half, this player does it again and gets a penalty called on him all 3 times. And his team is losing 8-1 at the half. So during halftime, the head coach goes on a tirade about how they're done scoring and they're not scoring again, and we're going to come back and win the game, which they did. They held them to 1 goal, and they came back and won 13-9. But during that halftime, after that meeting, I went over to that player, and his father is an assistant coach on that team, was at that time too, looked at him when he came off the field at halftime like, didn't even say a word, but the look on his face was, as an assistant coach and his father, what are you doing? How could you have all those penalties called on you? So after that meeting with the coaches, I went over to him and tapped him on the shoulder. And I said, listen, if 90 seconds into the match, the referee blows a whistle after he saw and I saw what you did and comes over and stands like right next to you and says, anybody who does this again throughout the game, every time I'm going to call a penalty, and he just lets you get away with one, and then he calls 3 of the same thing on you. Who did you think he was talking to when he came over to you? And he said, yeah, I know. After the game ended, after they came back to win, he came up to me and he said, I'm glad you gave me that talking to at the half. It made me realize what I was doing, that the ref was talking to and about me. And he played a clean second half. He led the comeback.
Right. Well, that's what it is. When you lose your temper and try and get even or punish somebody with an illegal move that could seriously hurt a player, you're not helping your team. You are showing that you can be intimidated by good play.
I think you realize, too, this wasn't football or wrestling. This is lacrosse, a different kind of a game, and it is physical, but you do have to watch how you use your stick in the game of lacrosse like you do.
And while we're at it, I mean, can we provide helmets for women field hockey players?
Yeah, I agree with that.
Lacrosse. I mean, that is just as dangerous as lacrosse. You're playing with sticks. You can get a stick in the face, and these girls aren't wearing masks. Shame on the schools that allow that, putting the girls at risk. And I
think more and more sports, with the exception of baseball, basically, you may need and basketball, which, you could get an elbow in the head in basketball, but it's tough to play if you got a helmet on. But most other sports, I think we're getting to the point where we got to have some kind of helmet requirement in pretty much every sport now, I think. That's just the way it is. And kids are bigger, faster, stronger. And when people collide, doesn't matter. They're 15, 16, 17. These are strong athletes at that age nowadays. Somebody might get hurt, and we have to prevent that.
Yes, and going back to that fair field rule, it's nuts not putting numbers on the back. What you are trying to do is avoid the responsibility of controlling your spectator crowds. Yeah. That means ejecting them and incurring wrath.
Yeah, you can have numbers on your back, but the fans can't yell those numbers out at you, at the player. They can't yell. You can't say, hey, 53, why did you miss that tackle? What's wrong with you? How could you miss that tackle?
It might be okay to do it, but it's certainly, but how do you, as an announcer, say who did what on the field?
Mm-hmm.
You can't do it.
Can't do it.
Can't do it. And
John Bailey, thank you for joining us here, as always, here on Westchester Talk Radio on the Beat in Westchester. John Bailey, publisher, editor, White Plains CitizenNet Reporter, WPCNR.com, host of On Cable Systems Around Westchester, White Plains Week, and People to Be Heard. John Bailey, we thank you. We'll talk to you again soon.
Until that time.
Till then, John Bailey here on Westchester Talk Radio. I'm John Marino, and we are made possible by, first of all, produced by Shark Creative, and made possible by Robeson Oil, the house that service built. By Michael Labriola, landscape design and construction of Armonk. By White Plains, New Rochelle, Mount Kisco, Jaguar Land Rover, located up and down the Hudson Valley. And by Hightower, Westchester 2. Catch all of our Westchester, Rockland, Putnam, and Dutchess, Orange, and Fairfield County Talk Radio programming on our YouTube channel, Shark Creative YouTube. Download our app, Westchester Talk, and now, yes, we are on Apple Podcasts, too.